Well, I think the RBI governor has done a very good job in at least calming the market, providing some control over the monetary policy as well as his exchange rate policy. However, I think there are still some uncertainties in terms of earnings, in terms of the economic momentum, which again has been disappointing on the downside. So I think in the near term, we may still see more volatility, more correction. But the positives are very cheap valuation, both in terms of the currency and also in the equity markets. And I think the reality is growth may well stay where they are for some time, but the downside risk is now very limited. Well, I think on average, you typically see Indian equities on an annual basis return somewhere around 10 to 15% on a local currency basis. So I think that is a reasonably starting point. But the thing is, if we are looking at a very depressed valuation, and hopefully once we clear out the political uncertainty sometime next year, I think on a 12 to 18-month basis, I think it's reasonable to assume maybe a 15–20% return proposition. Well, I think the politics clearly it's uncertain, but I think the reality is for those who've been investing in India long enough, they also realize that the government policies are fairly predictable around election times. So in that sense, I think once we have some clarity on who are the front runners and who could be the new government, I think that will be quickly priced into the market. But I think as we run up to the elections, what the current government is going to do, trying to support, to reinforce support or to gather support, that may well put a bit more pressure on the fiscal position. I think from a macro perspective, that is potential negative. Well, I do think that India growth could return to a better position relative to where we are now. So we're pretty much stuck in a 4 to 5% range. But I do think that as the global economy recovers, US improving, Europe stabilizing, all of this should help to provide some impetus to the Indian economy, even though export to GDP for India is relatively low. So I think overall, we feel that the downside risk to India is limited. I'm feeling reasonably confident that over the next 2 to 3 years, we could well go back to the 5 to 6% mark. However, returning to that 7% plus growth environment, it is going to require a much more stable political and policy environment. It does require the government really trying to be helpful to bring in more foreign investors. So I think that will require policy response instead of just relying on the raw momentum of the Indian economy.